Over the weekend, the Pac-12 saw two of the craziest singular sporting events you'll ever see, and they happened in the same day. Let's go.
Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12 Podcasts. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster. Thanks for making this your first listen or your first view. If you're watching on YouTube every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Conference of Champions. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing wherever you are listening to or watching this show right now, where I am about to go through literally one of the craziest things I have ever seen ever. So, right off the top, I feel like it's worth addressing. The Pac-12 is having its inaugural baseball tournament. As I record this, Stanford just knocked off Oregon State in the championship game after winning the regular season crown. They win the postseason crown as well. I understand that some people could see it as not being totally necessary. It's definitely not a necessary tournament because of how college baseball's postseason is structured, but this is one of the new implementations from Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff. And personally, I am a fan because everybody else has got one. You can argue the merits of that and whatnot, but whether or not you think it's something that you should have given the regional structure and that both teams are going to be hosting regionals and whatnot, that's a different conversation. But when everybody else has got one, you should have one too. Scottsdale is the easiest place to have it, I think, because it is something that you can rely on when it comes to the weather. It's going to be hot, and it was really hot. But I have to tell you about this about Saturday because some of you might not have seen this, and I haven't talked Pac-12 baseball in here before, but that's how crazy this was. I had a different idea for how to start the show. This was just too insane, absolutely too insane, and everyone should know how bonkers and crazy it really was. I mean, we got time all summer to talk about football and basketball news, right? This is absolutely absurd. So UCLA and Oregon State are playing on Saturday, and they ended up playing a doubleheader because it's a double elimination tournament. Winner goes to the Pac-12 championship game against Stanford. Oregon State got there. Here's how they got there. Beavs win their first two games. UCLA goes 2-1. And then here they come in an elimination game for the Bruins, and the Beavs are trying to avoid having to play a doubleheader. Game one, final score in 10 innings, 25-22 in favor of the Bruins. This is not a football score. This is not a basketball score. This is a baseball score, 25-22. A game that saw 53 hits, 5 errors. This is combined between UCLA and Oregon State. At one point, it was 7-2 UCLA. Then at another point during the game, it was 14-10 Oregon State because pitching is optional. And then pitching became almost outlawed, or at least good pitching, because going into the 9th inning of a college baseball game, it was 19-12. Yeah, the fireworks weren't done there. In the 9th, the Beavs, the visiting team in this particular matchup, scored 2 to make it 21-12 going into the 9th. Now, when you look on the ESPN app, they have these wonderful little barometers of how likely it is that a team is going to win a game. I don't think you can get any higher in terms of your expected win percentage than leading 21-12 going into the 9th. The Bruins then scored 9 runs. I am not making this up. For those of you that haven't heard this, I swear to you this is true. The Bruins in the same game scored 9 runs in the bottom half to tie it at 21 apiece going into extras. The game is well over 5 hours at this point. The Beavs push across a run in the 10th. UCLA in the bottom half ties the game on a balk. A balk by the Oregon State pitcher brings home the tying run, and then UCLA walks it off with a 3-run homer. So they put up 4 in the bottom of the 10th. They won 25-22. It took almost 6 hours to play that game. And then they had to turn around and play again in 45 minutes. This is where I feel like the conference should have stepped in and said, do you want to just play this game tomorrow morning? I mean, 6 hours. It's absurd. So then they turn around and you go to game 2 that saw the lead go back and forth. And Oregon State ended up winning 8-7. UCLA misplayed a pop-up to allow the tying run to score. And then the Pac-12 Player of the Year, Jacob Melton, drove in the winning run. At the end of the day, UCLA and Oregon State, you talk about the inaugural showing of the Pac-12 baseball tournament starting with a bang. This was indescribable. It is still inconceivable to me that this all happened in a day. There was over 9.5 hours of baseball played between these two programs in a single day. They spent over 12 hours at the ballpark this is on Saturday. I'm recording this Sunday night. And oh, by the way, this is in Scottsdale, where at the end of May, it is mid to upper 90s all day long, even once the sun sets. It's out there in the desert. That is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And I just could not do a show about the Pac-12 conference writ large and not bring that up, because that was absurd. Absolutely absurd. It is one of the wildest. I turned the first game off like 3 times thinking, oh, it's over. Oh, the Beavs came back. Oh, it's over. Oh, the Beavs are building on the lead. Oh, they've got him. Yeah, no. Just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Pac-12 baseball and softball, by the way, looking very, very strong in the postseason. Our next coaching evaluation in the Pac-12, as we switch back to the gridiron and talk some football, as always here on the show, is David Shaw, whose baseball counterpart is, I should say, the 2022 regular season and Pac-12 tournament champions, and they will be hosting a regional, and so that's a pretty good year. Yeah, I'd say their coach reached 700 career wins. That's pretty good. It's not bad. So David Shaw's evaluation is easily, in my opinion, the most difficult, probably because he's the longest tenured coach in the Pac-12 at this point in time. I'm double checking my math in my head right now to make sure that that's correct. But there are a number of reasons why his evaluation is so remarkably difficult. And I'll tell you why after I remind you our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. Go Mariners, by the way. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Shaw's coaching evaluation for the Stanford Cardinal is difficult because he kind of has 3 separate tenures in the midst of his 11-year tenure. So during his first 6 years, when you just look at it from a record perspective, but also when you consider, the program that he is at and, how successful they were, his first 6 years are an unquestioned A, bordering on an A+. I think the only thing holding him back from getting an A+ there is a college football playoff appearance, which they very nearly had, but lost a late season game to Oregon and Vernon Adams at home in Palo Alto. But the first 6 years are an A. Then it's about a B to a B+ for the next couple. They won 9 years or 9 games in back-to-back seasons, I think it was. But then the last 3 years, it's been about a C- because they've had sub-500 seasons in each of the last full football campaigns in the Pac-12 in 2019 and then in 2021. I don't know what to do with that. It's really, really tough. I mean, I'm landing overall, because I'm examining the totality of his tenure, I'm landing on an A- because I can't forget that Stanford, who at the end of the 2000s, the first decade, was a joke of a program. Jim Harbaugh turned it around, and then David Shaw continued upon that momentum, but that's not always an easy thing to do. Ask Mark Helfrich at Oregon. He did it for a little bit, and then it went down into the tank, and Oregon has since moved on in several ways with multiple head coaches. But I can't just forget, even in light of the last couple of years where Stanford has struggled, that Stanford was a player with big time educational standards on the national stage for a long time. Now, they also have a fairly large endowment over at Stanford, and they're capable of being good, but it is not an easy place to coach. It's not an easy place to recruit, but in 11 years, he's 93-45. That is an outstanding record for a college football coach at any program in any conference, let alone at Stanford, where they're recruiting a certain sort of player, not in a bad way per se, but they're right. I mean, we all understand what the limitations are, or what the extra challenges presented while at Stanford as the head coach. Now, I will say, when you have an extended run in college football as a head coach, the way David Shaw has had with one school, it's really hard to be good to great every single year, right? Nick Saban does it, but Les Miles couldn't keep doing it, or couldn't stay at the level where LSU wanted him to. I mean, there's copious examples of coaches who were good, but that then started to fall off a little bit, and it was like, oh, he was at the top, he's really good, and then started to drop down and such. It's really, really hard, which is why I'm not yet giving him a significant drop off in his overall grade for the last 2 or 3 seasons being under 500. But if it happens again this year and Stanford drops, a 4-8, even a 5-7 record this season, then he would fall out of the A category, because you can't rest on your old laurels forever. But I think that the level he had them at, winning multiple Rose Bowls, right? It's just getting to those sorts of games, winning conference championships. I can't just ignore all of that, but it does start to fade if you are the head coach of the program that is steering itself down towards the bottom of the conference where they've been the last couple of years. But his overall valuation is just so difficult because of that. I mean, you win 10 or more games in 5 of your first 6 seasons. He had a 4-2 bowl record in those games. They lost in the Fiesta in 2011 and the Rose Bowl in 2013. I think it was against Michigan State, if memory serves, on a goal line stand. You talk about smash mouth football. Stanford and Michigan State is the epitome of that. But he also won 2 Rose Bowls, and he won a Sun Bowl, and then there was a mid-level bowl in there as well. After that 6-year run, where he had 5 10-plus win seasons, it was back-to-back 9-win seasons. That's kind of the B to B plus I was talking about. They went 1-1 in a couple of non-New Year's Six bowl games. They lost in the Alamo Bowl to TCU, which is apparently a theme for the Pac-12, to just lose in the Alamo Bowl. That's a really, really common thing when you look at it anyway. And then they beat Pitt 14-13 in the Sun Bowl, right? So that was kind of like, okay, this is Stanford football. You win in 9 games a year. That's fine. That's acceptable. Not incredible, not what it was not that long ago, but it was fine. But now it's 2 out of 3 losing seasons, in which Stanford is 11-19 over the last 3 campaigns overall. And I think that now, because we know what Stanford is capable of being, and where David Shaw has had that program, you do start to view it in a different light compared to how you might have seen it, 10 years ago. I mean, 15 years ago or so, when it was a program that if they'd won 9 games, you would have been jumping for joy as a Cardinal fan. That was fantastic. We won 9 games. That was amazing. But now you've seen Stanford be on the cusp of getting a college football playoff, and they've won a couple of Rose Bowls, including last time they were there. They routed Iowa because they were a much better football team. It's starting to kind of go in a different direction. And so 2 out of 3 losing seasons, not great. If they're able to bounce back with an 8-9 win campaign, then I will keep his grade here overall at an A-. But if it's a 3-9, 4-8 season, then that's going to drop significantly, because now it's not an aberration where, you had a down year, and in the shortened year, they were good, but kind of hard to have big takeaways there. They come back, and then they went 3-9 a season ago, and they've just lost themselves when it comes to their identity. They don't look the same, as they did when they were at their peak, when they were running the ball really well and they had big physical defenses that made it hard to run on them. That just wasn't the case. They had one of, if not the worst rush defense in the conference a season ago. That is very, very antithetical to, I got it out. It's very antithetical to what Stanford football has become known for and what they are really, really good at. But the recruiting is, still in it's still in a pretty good spot. I'd say overall it's trending down a touch, but recruiting, I give David Shaw a B plus. And remember, if you haven't heard the other coach evaluations, I've already done Chip Kelly. I've already done Jonathan Smith. I'm going to go through the guys who have actually been coaches in the conference before I get to the ones who are coming over as first time coaches in the Conference of Champions, whether they've been previous head coaches or not. But there are 5 areas where I'm giving grades here, right? There's an overall, which is an A minus at this point for Shaw when you look at the totality of his tenure. There's recruiting, game management and scheme, player development, and then the 5th one is assistant hires. So every coach gets a grade for all that sort of stuff. And Shaw, A minus overall, B plus in the recruiting ranks. And it's tough to recruit at Stanford, but they've also had perennial top 30 high school classes, which is pretty darn impressive. It really is when you think about, they can't just go after anyone. They're going after a specific sort of someone because the other aspect of a Stanford education is still highly involved when you're recruiting players to play football for the Cardinal. Now, the reason that I say the recruiting is trending down, in college football, the transfer portal is here. With the one-time freebie rule, it's here to stay. Genie's out of the bottle. You can't put it back in. The transfer portal is there, and Stanford, it seems, based on the rankings from 24/7 Sports, is not even pretending to acknowledge that the transfer portal exists. The last 3 years, their transfer portal hauls have ranked 115th nationally, 242nd, and 235th. You might be wondering, well, wait a minute, Spencer, how many FBS schools are there? That's a great question, Pac-12 sports fan. And let me tell you, the answer is 130. So they're not going at it with great volume, nor are they going at it with great success. And that speaks to what I was just talking about a moment ago, talking about the recruiting limitations you have there. You can't just bring in anybody to Stanford. The school does not allow that. You have to bring in the sorts of players who are going to be academically eligible and can succeed in a major way in the classroom. That's a big part of coming to Stanford. And what makes it all the more impressive, they've been at a level where you talk about them in the context of the college football playoff, or where you talk about them as a Pac-12 contender or a Pac-12 favorite and Rose Bowl champions, and they won a Fiesta Bowl. I mean, they've won, 2 New Year's 6 BCS Bowls, or sorry, 3, while David Shaw has been there, 1 while he was the offensive coordinator and 2 while he was the head coach. And then they've been to 2 more as well. So it's really tough. But the problem with that is they might have to adapt that in some way, because other teams are going to be able to capitalize on the portal and bring in anybody who's available who can improve their roster, fill a hole right now, while the younger guys, the high school recruits, develop, who might not be ready to step in and contribute on a team that wants to contend for a Pac-12 championship. But Stanford is just not about that. I mean, those ratings are kind of hard to believe, but they're sticking to their formula. And I just wonder if there will come a point in time where they have to look at it and go, okay, we can't keep up with the other teams that are able to fill the holes on their roster immediately, whereas we have to rely on the player development of our high school recruits, or, bring in the sorts of guys who can contribute really, really early in their careers. That's going to be really, really difficult. And I think a challenge for them going forward, but I still keep recruiting a B plus because they've got another top 30 class at the high school level, and that's a great place to be, to bring in that sort of influx of talent, and especially after a season in which they went 3-9. But I'm just asking the question here: is that going to come back to bite them, that they can't fill holes immediately because of what it takes to be a football player at Stanford, or just a student at Stanford in general? Game management and scheme is the third area where we're judging coaches here on Locked On Pac-12. I give David Shaw a B plus. Now, I think this used to be an A or an A minus. I think he was really at a high level when things were rolling. But the last few years, it's just not been as good. They've lost a couple coordinators. I'll get to that to round out today's show in a moment here. But the thing about David Shaw that I like is he has a clear identity on offense, and Stanford needs to get back to that, being able to run the ball, control the clock, but they have to bring it on the defensive side of the ball as well. And that's not nothing, to know the sorts of players you're looking for out on the recruiting trail and how they're going to fit into your scheme, I think is really important and allows you to have the best possible chance to be successful as a football coach who also happens to be the play caller on the offensive side of the ball. So I think that he's proven he knows how to win big games and he knows how to dial up offensive performances that are able to allow their defense to maybe allow a few points here and there. But it has started to falter in the last few years, and the offense has not been what it used to be. And so because the defense hasn't been there, they've kind of lost their way in that sense. So I think they have to kind of get back to that. But again, I think it used to be maybe an A or A minus, but because Stanford, was never going to bring in like a top 10 caliber recruiting class like a USC or an Oregon could, where they're just loaded up with a bunch of high end 4, maybe some 5-star caliber players, and you just throw them out there and you're like, oh, those are just, borderline NFL guys already at this particular age. And I think Stanford has always, not in the way that like a Cal or Oregon State or Colorado does, but in some ways they have to do a little bit more with less in that sense. Not majorly, but so I'll still keep him at a B plus there. Player development, this stays at an A minus. Even through their struggles, they've continued to send players to the NFL. There's Cardinal players all over the league. They're everywhere. I forgot that Dalton Schultz went to Stanford. I mean, he's not even the best tight end. Zach Ertz is probably the best tight end Stanford has sent, but they've had a bunch of guys there. Parkinson was just recently taken by the Seahawks. Andrews Pete, the offensive lineman. If you go way back, there have been several quarterbacks come through who have come, if you're looking at it just from a college perspective. Actually, hold on, let me finish my NFL thought. That was just a sidebar, and I got sidetracked in my notes. And anyway, but they've sent a lot of guys to the NFL who have had success. And when you draft a player from Stanford, there's an expectation. Solomon Thomas didn't work out, but those sorts of guys are, the players that Stanford's capable of sending. They can be good players, and they have been, particularly in the trenches. Offensive and defensive linemen, I think, is where the Cardinal have really made their money when you're talking about the pro players. And then, of course, there's Christian McCaffrey, who, by the way, was a 4-star running back when he came out of high school, but didn't have any like big time offers. Like there was no Alabama or a Georgia, LSU, Ohio State. They weren't in. I don't know what exactly they were missing, but Stanford, of course, maximized his potential to the fullest, and he was robbed of a Heisman Trophy in that 2015-16 season. But all the tight ends, defensive linemen over the years we've seen, and end up going to the NFL. They've had a lot of talent coming through, but they've developed it very well. They haven't brought in the sorts of players who, like a Kayvon Thibodeau at Oregon who comes through and is going to be a top pick in the NFL draft. They haven't had that many players of that sort, but they develop it exceptionally well. And that's why I keep this at an A minus. But also looking at it just from a college perspective, look at the number of quarterbacks they've had come through. Obviously, there was Andrew Luck, but that was, Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw together. But Shaw started with Kevin Hogan, who was only a 3-star recruit, and he turned into a really solid college quarterback. And then they've had Tanner McKee, Davis Mills, who, have shown some nice things. Mills is now the starter for the Houston Texans. Didn't see that one coming, but McKee might very well be a mid to late round draft pick at the quarterback position. They've had several guys come through with success, and I think that speaks to their player development. And again, it goes back to what I was talking about, having a clear identity, knowing what you need from each position, and recruiting the sorts of players who can do just that, I think has been something that Shaw and his staffs have been really exceptional at. Speaking of those staffs, as we round out his coaching evaluation here, the offensive coordinator for Stanford currently is Tavita Pritchard, who's been in the role since 2018. He's a former Stanford quarterback. The defensive coordinator is Lance Anderson, who was also hired in 2018 and has been on staff for the Cardinal in some capacity since 2007. I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a whole litany of coordinators that they've had, But, there have been a couple guys who David Shaw has gotten hired as head coaches. Mike Bloomgren, former offensive coordinator, he's the head coach at Rice. And I wouldn't say, and Derek Mason as well, left to be the head coach at Vanderbilt, which, talk about tough places to win. That's pretty brutal. But when I think about, incredible elite staffs or places that are just churning out future head coaches to be, or you're just kind of always watching like, oh, when is that program's offensive or defensive coordinator going to get plucked away? I haven't thought of Stanford in that way in a significant sense. They've had some good ones over the years, but I think assistant hires are kind of at a C plus. Like they've been fine, they've been solid, and again, I'm not handing out A's and A minuses here. Like I think their player development is an A minus because it's been really, really good. I am not a high school or college professor or teacher that's going to just give out A's and A minuses. No, you got to earn it here on the show, and they definitely have in that sense. But assistant hires, they've been fine, right? They've been solid. And I think that, overall, he still got the A-. He still gets the A- overall grade because of what he was. That's the highest grade I've given out so far. Chip Kelly and Jonathan Smith were both B pluses, I believe. I should know that off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure I gave both a B or a B plus, which is a great place to be. But Shaw definitely gets an A- for what he did. But he's got to start to turn things around, or else that grade is going to drop. I appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.